Doc, I'll give you the lift. No problem.
Forget it, Palmer.
Hey, thanks for thinking about it, though.
John Carpenter's The Thing is one of my favorite science fiction horror movies of all time. I believe it's right up there with the other sci-fi classics such as Alien, Predator, which, by the way, I found the opening scene of Predator to be almost identical to the opening scene in The Thing. And Predator came out after, so I just thought I'd point that out. Anyways, let's get back to the topic at hand and analyze how the 1982 classic The Thing was able to effectively use horror in isolation. So what I'm going to do is narrow down the most important things to focus on and show some examples of some great confined horrors and why they work. So here's how to write horror in isolation. So the first thing you need to take into account when writing a confined horror is setting. This is one of the most important aspects because in a contained story, the entire movie will be based on the premise of the location. In Ridley Scott's Alien, the story takes place on a commercial starship in outer space where there's no immediate contact to the human world. In Predator, the story takes place in the jungles of Central America, where once again, our characters are too far away from civilization to get any sort of help. Now, this doesn't mean that your confined horror needs to take place thousands of miles away from civilization in order to achieve the effect of isolation. It can literally be as simple as an apartment, or a room, or even an attic. In The Vigil, the entire movie takes place in a house, and it is one of the most effective confined horrors I've ever seen. In The Thing, the story takes place in Antarctica, which is a perfect setting to achieve that feeling of isolation since it's uninhabited by humans and it's thousands of miles away from civilization. This is what's going to be the hook of the story, and once you have that, we can now take a look at how you can construct the conflict for your story. So how can you keep the tension and conflict high throughout an entire movie when you're constrained to one location? You see, this is where things get tricky because most movies don't have to deal with these types of limitations. Most movies deal with philosophical problems where characters struggle with their beliefs and have to go through change. That's what keeps the tension and conflict high throughout the film. In horror, it's a little different because character change and development are usually not the focal point. Instead, these types of movies are more like roller coasters filled with tension and release. Therefore, these types of movies need a specific kind of structure to keep the tension high. In The Thing, the structure can be broken down into 4 major components: tension and release, progressive complications, info reveals, and clarity. The first part of all this structure is tension and release. The story will slowly and gradually build to a climactic point and then suddenly release the tension. This will form a new situation in which the tension will rise again to another breaking point. One of the best examples of this in the movie is when MacReady ties everyone down to test their blood. Since we don't know who's human or not, the tension quickly rises as MacReady heats the metal because we don't know who's the thing. And then when the blood doesn't react to the metal, the tension gets released because we now know that individual is not the thing. However, you can't just have tension and release. Each new surge of tension and release has to build upon the previous one. The stakes must continuously rise until the final breaking point at the end of the scene or the story itself. This is what will keep the audience engaged with the story and constantly concerned with what will happen next. So how is this accomplished? By having each wave of tension and release push the story into a new, more extreme situation. If we look back to the blood test example, every time MacReady gets a negative result, the stakes continue to rise because we know that we're narrowing down the possibilities of who it could be until we finally reach the breaking point of the scene when we come to find out that Palmer was the thing all along. Alright, now let's move on to the third part of this structure, which is information reveals. Information reveals are critical pieces of information that can drastically change the character's situation. This is extremely useful in confined horror because it can help elevate personal conflicts without having characters leave the contained setting. In The Thing, when MacReady sees Blair mysteriously run inside, it is then revealed to us that Blair has cut the wires of the helicopter. This is a problem, because now our characters can't leave since the helicopter was their only means of transportation. This means they're forced to deal with the problem head-on amongst each other. Another big piece of information is revealed to us near the end of the movie when we find out that Blair, which at this point is the Thing, has been building a ship to get out of there. This is a massive issue. If Blair is able to get the ship operating and somehow reach civilization, there could be devastating consequences for human life on Earth. These reveals create new situations for the characters without them having to go to another location or introduce a new character. They can also act as a way to help progressively complicate the story and bring the characters into a new chain of tension. Last but not least is clarity. There needs to be clarity in the conflict. While some types of movies try to be ambiguous, confined horrors need clarity to create immediate and real tension. The audience must never be confused about the problems your protagonist is facing. The audience's understanding of the problem and the consequences of the protagonist failing are important for the audience to be completely engaged with your main character. In The Thing, the conflict is clear. There is something out there killing the men and imitating them. Therefore, due to the nature of how this thing spreads, they can't let it get out of Antarctica alive. In Alien, there's a creature killing everyone on board and Ripley has to fight to stay alive and kill it. Same thing with Predator. Something is out there in the woods, hunting them down one by one, and Arnold has to fight for his life. These three classic movies keep everything simple. It's much better to keep clarity and focus rather than trying to add all sorts of extra elements that don't work with the logic of the story. So that's my analysis of The Thing and how they did a great job at using horror in isolation. So let me know, what are your thoughts on the 1982 classic, The Thing? Is it one of your favorite science fiction movies? Drop it down in the comments, and as always, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not already, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.